Our final speaker for this session is Stephen D. Ricks. He completed his bachelor's degree in ancient Greek and master's in the classics at Brigham Young University, and then received his PhD in ancient Near Eastern religions from the University of California, Berkeley, and the Graduate Theological Union. While completing his doctoral work, he spent 2 years studying at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. He is now professor of Hebrew and cognate learning at Brigham Young University, where he has been a member of the faculty for nearly 30 years. Stephen D. Ricks.
I have peaked. You can set your mind at ease. BYU football team beat Baylor today, 34-28.
You should have said spoiler alert. I left the room.
The disciples of Jesus, inquiring of him concerning the man who was born blind, asked him, "Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" This question suggests a belief among the disciples who followed in the tradition of ancient Pharisaic Judaism, a belief in premortal existence. This belief in premortal existence, a legacy of ancient Israelite religion, is also expressed in the writings of the Qumran community. In what follows, I consider a belief in premortal existence in the ancient Israelite faith, in ancient Pharisaic Judaism, and in the Dead Sea Scrolls, with an additional foray into the discussions of premortal existence in ancient Christianity, particularly in the Clementine recognitions and the writings of Clement of Alexandria and Origen. Before beginning a discussion of belief in premortal existence in ancient Israel, permit me to quote an observation made by Robert Hammerton Kelly, who wrote a study on the idea of preexistence in the New Testament, citing the great German theologian and scholar of the New Testament and early Christianity. This heavenly existence was of two kinds, most frequently the valuable entities, which we should, the German is Wesen, and the meaning could also be understood as beings, were thought to exist in God's knowledge as part of his plan for the world. Less frequently, the entities or beings were thought to exist in heaven, independently and in their own right. To balance matters, could we not say that being a part of God is be part of a design in God's mind, and independent existence as individual premortal experience be placed on an equal footing, nothing more frequently or less frequently? We continue to Jeremiah, describing his call to be a prophet, reports that God told him, "Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee, and before thou camest out of the womb, I sanctified thee and ordained thee a prophet to the nations." Before we continue on to my comment, let me note the three meanings of yada, which in Hebrew means to know, that will enhance our understanding of this particular verse. The first meaning of yada, to know, means to know a fact. The second meaning of yada means to have sexual relations with. An example of that is, "And Adam knew, yada, Eve, his wife," that we find in Genesis 4:1. The third, and for purposes of understanding its covenant or treaty connection of yada, means to enter into, recognize, and maintain a treaty or covenant relationship with an individual or a people. We read in Exodus 1:8, "Now there arose up a new king over Egypt who knew not," which I understand to mean had not entered into, recognized, or maintained a covenant relationship with Joseph. We will want to go back and note this as well. The phrasing, "I sanctified thee, and I ordained thee a prophet to the nations," suggests an acceptance of individual premortal existence coupled with God's design for that individual. To return to the matter of premortal existence of souls that was raised in John 9:2, the disciples of Jesus, inquiring of him concerning the man who was born blind, asked him, "Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Terrell Givens, who has written very extensively on belief in premortal existence, observes that Jesus expressly states that the man's sins were not the cause of his inherited condition, thus implicitly condoning the presupposition, and I believe that the phrase, "who did sin, this man or his parents," very strongly suggests a belief among ancient Pharisaic rabbinic Jews in individual premortal existence. Very powerfully, we find it there. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, members of the Qumran community who wrote what we now have as the Dead Sea Scrolls reflect a belief in premortal existence, whether in God's foreknowledge or as independently existing spirits. We read in the Hodayot, that is the Thanksgiving, let me see if okay, one slide. There are those you founded before the centuries to judge them through all your works before creating them together with the host of your spirits and the assembly of the holy vault and all the hosts and the earth and all its produce. We should note, too, that Josephus observes this, who spent time with the Essenes and became very sympathetic to their beliefs, decided not to join with them, but was very impressed by what they believed. He says about them, "Souls are immortal and continue forever, and that they come out of the most subtle air and are united to their bodies as to prisons into which they are drawn by a certain natural enticement, but that they are set free from their bonds of the flesh. They then, as released from a long bondage, rejoice and mount upward." And this is like the opinion of the Greeks, and I should probably have mentioned that the Greek influence on the thought of Second Temple Judaism and of early Christianity was very, very strong. Further, in the rule of the community, we read this: "Before things came into existence, he determined a plan for them." Whether in God's foreknowledge or in independent existence. The phrase "before things came into existence" may mean that God formed physical bodies for them. We continue on from there to a belief in premortal existence in early Christianity. and we'll want to look at the Clementine recognitions. Among the very earliest Christian writings mentioning premortal existence was the recognitions, tenuously attributed to Clement of Rome, historically one of the first bishops of Rome, but which may have been written by a different Clement. It was read and quoted by Origen, who was active in the late 2nd, early 3rd centuries AD. The Greek original is lost for the recognitions. The text, however, is accessible through a Latin translation made by the monk Rufinus of Aquileia around the latter part of the 4th century AD. The recognitions tells the story of Clement's search for the meaning and purpose of life that takes him from Roman Italy to Palestine, where he meets and speaks with the Apostle Peter. Clement, who wonders whether he did not exist before he was born, is given the answer when Peter relates to him the stages of creation, about the creation of the firmament, light, plants, animals, and paradise. Finally, God creates man, on whose account he had prepared all things, whose internal species, for which we should read soul, is older, and for whose sake all things that were made, given up to his service and assigned to the uses of his habitation. We continue to Clement of Alexandria. He was one of the leading figures in early Christian thought in Alexandria. He was active during the late 2nd and early 3rd centuries AD. He is perhaps most noted for his comment regarding man's origin and destiny, one we heard before. God became man so that man could strive to become God. About premortal existence, Clement observes, and here we get a quotation, according to Plato, they think that good souls, on quitting the super-celestial region, submit to come to Tartarus, and assuming a body, share in all the ills which are involved in birth, from their solicitude for the race of men. Terrell Gibbons implies that Clement of Alexandria's belief in premortal existence may have been influenced by Greek philosophy. Yaroslav Pelikan, who, despite his very Slavic-sounding name, was an American, a native-born American. His father was a Lutheran minister. Go figure, in any event. He wrote about what Clement of Alexandria said. He said that passages in the writings of Clement do suggest the preexistence of the human soul, although he believes that some of these writings may have been influenced by Gnostic teachings. Allow me to take a brief detour to the Gnostics. Gnostics believed that their gnosis, or knowledge, was necessary to attain salvation. They believed that they possessed many of the teachings that the resurrected Lord shared with his disciples during the so-called 40-day ministry, when he was preparing them to the disciples to teach the gospel to the world. Indeed, much of what is known, in fact, a great deal of what is known about the 40-day ministry, we know from the Gnostics. the ancient Orthodox traditions, both Eastern and Western, shied away from, if not outright rejected these teachings, which included a belief in premortal existence, and this is very important. According to my colleague and friend John Gee, these accounts include the following about the 40-day ministry. Jesus teaches the apostles the gospel they should preach to the world. He tells of a premortal life and the creation of the world, adding that this is a probationary state of choosing between good and evil, and that those who choose good might return to the glory of God. He foretells events of the last days, including the return of Elijah. He also tells the disciples that the primitive church will be perverted after one generation and teaches them to prepare for tribulation. These apocryphal accounts state that Christ's resurrection gives his followers hope for their own resurrection in glory. Besides salvation for the living, salvation for the dead is a major theme, as are the ordinances baptism, the sacrament or Eucharist, ordination of the apostles to authority, their being blessed one by one, and an initiation of, or endowments, which we find in the latter chapters of Luke, called mysteria or mysteries, with an emphasis on garments, marriage, and prayer circles. These accounts, usually called secret in the Greek apocryphon and in Coptic, are often connected somehow to the temple or compared to the Mount of Transfiguration. Sometimes the apostles are said to ascend to heaven where they see marvelous things, and whether everything in such accounts is the actions of the apostles after the post-resurrection visits of Jesus can contrast sharply with those before. Before the crucifixion and resurrection, they had a very different approach to things. After the 40-day ministry, they were completely transformed as individuals. In fact, some of the sacredest teachings in the Latter-day Saint tradition, including what is taught in the holiest precincts in Latter-day Saint tradition, were taught during the 40-day ministry. In the titanic struggle between the Orthodox faiths, both Eastern and Western, and Gnosticism, some teachings were rejected that might have been preserved, such as a belief in premortal existence, as well as some others that are dear to the hearts of Latter-day Saints, such as those shared by the risen Lord to the disciples during the 40-day ministry. Now, we want to look at an observation made by Origen, who also was active in the early 3rd century AD. He says, "Let us not think that differences of birth and fortune are accidental, but rather distributed each one according to his deserts. Why was Jacob preferred to Esau? He deserved to be, and so it must be with all other men and all other creatures. Jacob was preferred even in the womb. So we believe that he was even then chosen by God because of his merits acquired by his life." We want to note an observation again made by Hugh Nibley. While Origen often gets himself into trouble as an incurable speculator, he is scrupulously and uniquely honest in stating when an idea is his own, when he's guessing, when he's assuming for the sake of argument, or when he's expressing a settled opinion. In the interest of time, let me just move forward to the conclusions. Instances reflecting a belief in premortal existence and not simply of God's foreknowledge may be seen in ancient Israel, in ancient Pharisaic rabbinic Judaism, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and in ancient Christianity. In its struggle against Gnosticism, the Orthodox Christian faiths, Eastern and Western, jettisoned adherence to a belief in premortal existence, which has continued to this day. Premortal, and this is another thing that is very interesting that has only occurred in the last few centuries. Premortal existence, as has been recently argued, forms the basis of individual freedom. If one could justifiably say that he hadn't decided to be born and lived at a particular time and place in history, there would be no individual freedom. Thank you very much. That's a very good. Won't you come into my pub?
Yes, of course. Thank you for that excellent presentation. We do have a couple of questions for you. One about some pretty technical linguistic stuff here. Well, maybe not that technical, but your discussion of the Hebrew yada reminds the questioner here of the Arabic wada, I think is probably how that's said. Wada, okay. To place or set. Are these two words cognates, and could yada mean to place under covenant? And which of the meanings for yada is the oldest that you mentioned?
I am guessing yada and wada in Arabic are cognate with each other. I'm not really sure that the meanings square with each other particularly. I am guessing, however, that the Hebrew word yada probably initially had the sense of to know a fact or a thing, and it developed additional senses later on.
Excellent. This next question is also related to Hebrew yada, and it's actually asking, could the third connotation of yada inform our understanding of Matthew 7:21 through 23? Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father. Many will say unto me, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, so on and so forth, or maybe yada, 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 I guess. And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. So, yeah, does the third meaning of yada give any insight onto that passage?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I've written an article about that before, where yada is used in connection with individuals. It's either in the context of sexual relations or in the context of covenant or treaty making. And this particular one is, I think, quite patently to be understood in a covenantal context. I never knew you mean I never entered into recognizing me